Hello and welcome to Overcome a Mental Health Podcast, a place where you can openly talk about your mental health. I'd like to introduce today's guest. We are talking to Jim Schreiber. Did I say your last name correctly?
You got it 100% correct.
Perfect. I should have asked that before. I apologize. Jim is a 15-year veteran of consumer goods startups and recent founder of Vital Spring, the world's first premium mineral replenisher. Today, Jim was gracious enough to come on the show and speak to us about his experience with anxiety, the connection between essential minerals and mental health, and tips for those that are struggling. Jim, let's just get started with your story.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. My journey with anxiety probably started when I moved to New York City about 15 years ago, because anxiety is just in the air here. But it really accelerated during COVID. So I unfortunately was stuck in New York City when the first wave of COVID hit here in 2020, which itself was sort of like isolating and really kind of trapped you in. I found myself in early summer 2020 in the ICU. So I was kind of like part of that first wave of COVID pneumonia. Ended up being in the hospital for about 10 days. To be honest, it was all sort of a blur.
So you got a really bad case of it then?
Yeah, right at the beginning. And part of it was, if you remember back in those days, especially in like New York City, we were kind of told, don't go to the hospital until you need to. But the problem was, how do you know when you need to? So I ended up probably waiting too long, which was before I went to the hospital in that first round of COVID, which didn't do me any favors. So that's where I ended up in the ICU. Luckily, I was there when sort of my like lung function crashed. So I was in the ER when that happened, and ended up kind of on steroids, close monitoring and all that, in complete isolation for 10 days. So, I mean, that sucked. I mean, luckily, I made it through. And one thing that I kind of got lucky with was, after that experience of being in isolation for 10 days, I don't exactly know what kind of angel reached out to me, if it was like part of a hospital group or a doctor, but I started to get a call, maybe about a week after I got out of the ICU. I got a call from an agency that basically said, a huge percentage of people who go through the experience you just had, being in isolation, going into the ICU for more than 2 days, you end up with anxiety. And in my mind, it was like so far in the back of like what I needed to worry about, because I was trying to build up my lung function. I had this like thing I had to blow into. I was trying to just like almost learn how to walk again. I could only walk like around my apartment 5 times before I'd like run out of breath. So they were calling me, and I kind of put it in the back. I'm like, yeah, sure. Anxiety, mental health, like I've got bigger problems. But turns out I did. So they convinced me to kind of do a screener, and they explained sort of this whole process with their like kind of post ICU mental health kind of like fix, and convinced me to talk to a therapist. And after I talked kind of like this first person, like a screener, they're like, you have moderate to severe anxiety. Like, you don't even realize it. And that's when I started to recognize, like, I'm completely ignoring, like, not being able to sleep, sleeping at weird times of the day. My heart starting to race at different points of the day. And I started to take it seriously. So that screening got me into a kind of an intensive program. So it was at least 2 months of twice a week. I had a behavior coach and I had a therapist, just talking through like what anxiety was. So it honestly took me probably 2 or 3 weeks of that just to like recognize that what I was experiencing was anxiety. This isn't normal, which I think that's almost like the first thing, especially not to be stereotypical, but as a guy, you're kind of told to like suck it up, like ignore it. And that thing that like, yeah, that pain in your shoulder, that's one thing. It's another thing when you justify like not sleeping days at a time, or like drinking way too much caffeine, or like almost like shaking with nerves. It became overwhelming. So it took a couple weeks, started to recognize that, recognize that I had anxiety. And then I dove in and really kind of took that program really, really seriously. for the last couple of weeks from that, and then continued on with a therapist for kind of a year or so after that as well. So that's kind of my journey of how I ended up with anxiety. And yeah, that program, which I also would love to kind of hear about your journey too, about how you discovered that
Yes.
mental health challenges.
Yeah. So mine started, the ones, I mean, nothing like really growing up that I can think of, but my mental health challenges started back in 2009. I started having seizures.
Mhm.
And the first little bit, it was like really, really rough. I had like probably 30 to 40 seizures in the span of a month. And I went in and out of neurologists, like saw like 5 of them. They would promise stuff and I just never got any results.
Yeah.
And during this time, like, so mine's like it's kind of a split between anxiety and depression. And during this time, like things, started getting a little bit dark. But it wasn't until years later that I actually admitted that I have a problem. And then it got to the point where, like, I didn't want to go places. I wanted to be alone. Like big crowds, like made me nervous. It didn't get to the point of like big panic attacks, but it would be like, if we were going out somewhere, I'd definitely be like, you know what, I could feel my heart like flutter, and I'm like, I can't do this. And so, luckily for me, my fiance back at the time, she stayed with me throughout all this, and we're married now. So I picked out a good one.
Yeah.
But it honestly wasn't until I think it was at least 5 to 6 years later that I was like, I have a problem. People kept telling me, your anxiety is really bad. You need to do something about it. And I started therapy. I didn't start therapy until like 2017, 18. And then at that time I lost my job. And so I couldn't afford it. And then like, by this time the seizures had completely stopped. So it was like, I'd get migraines and have seizures like once a year. And then back in 2024, I had a setback. I started having those seizures again. I had about 30 in about a month. I ended up going to the ER, and my anxiety just got really bad. I had a run-in with, I was dissociating myself like really, really bad. But I got diagnosed with what's called PNES, which is psychogenic non-epileptic seizures. And so basically that means that the seizures aren't firing from your brain. It's just, they say it's usually based on trauma. I am convinced that they can be physiological too. So so towards the end of 2024 is when I actually was like, what, I really need to dig in and see therapists. And that's when I did and started going. I think I started out going like twice a week, and now I'm still going once a week now, and I'm just to that point where I think I'm cutting it back to once a month, just because I'm like you hit that point and you're like, what, I could see the difference this is making.
Yeah, it's worth it. And you hit at one thing that was really eye-opening for me. That program that they kind of pushed me into, like, hey, what you just experienced is going to cause anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
It was fully funded by my health insurance, and they argued it. I mean, they explained it. They're like, you doing this program would be cheaper for us long term than you having to develop like severe panic attacks. And I realized that, like, in the back of my mind, like, I've always kind of thought maybe it's a New York City thing, like, oh, I should go to a therapist. I should see somebody. Like, I'm not sleeping well. Work is causing too much stress, blah, 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 blah. But then I saw the expense of it, and it's impossible to find therapists. It's covered by insurance, and you kind of go through all of that. And I don't know how many hours I had spent over the years on like Psychology Today, which I feel like, to trying to define the right match of somebody who takes, I have Aetna health insurance, and like and this is probably maybe part of the anxiety thing. I had all these rules. I'm like, I don't want to go too far away. Like, I don't want to like commute 45 minutes, but I also don't want somebody down the street because I don't want to accidentally run into them like at the coffee shop. So, So when you started going to therapy, did you find a good therapist that fit like with your personality right away? Or did it take you did you have to go through multiple? multiple. Like when in like the heat of post ICU, like it was sort of like anybody would have been fine. And I was really lucky that it was two women that I got matched with, uh got along pretty well with them. And at that point it was like, so I think the word might be acute. It was so acute that it was like I just needed anything. Then I have had problems with like finding like the right therapist match since then, kind of when I'm on my own. And that's why, I'm spending so much time on psychology today, trying to find that needle in the haystack. Because finding a therapist, I wonder if you had kind of a similar challenge with like, you find somebody and then you have to schedule them. I've had issues over the years with like,
Yeah, see, I feel like I really lucked out. So the first time I went to therapy in like 17, 18, I got along really well with him and honestly didn't have to go to anybody else. But then when I stopped going and started going back just recently, I went to one place that sounded like really good, but I could not get on their schedule. Like I got in for one session and then they didn't get a hold of me for like another month. So I was like, okay, you know what? I got to make a decision. And I just honestly went back to the guy that I saw before and we've meshed really well.
yeah, I had that happen too, where like something happened with scheduling. Maybe somebody went out for maternity leave,
Mm-hmm.
and they ended up being like, "Oh, the one time we can see you now, right?" And just I had gotten over the hump of like getting to know a therapist and feeling confident. She's like, "Oh, well, I can see you at 8 a.m. on Mondays." I was like, "Well, no."
Yeah.
One of my problems is not sleeping well, so like that seems
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of funny. So the
counterproductive.
guy that I started back up with, he's like during our first session, he said something along the lines of like, "Don't let me, you know, like, because I'm the one who picked him when I found him online, and I matched really well with what he was doing." He's like, "But don't let me be the one to stop you from getting the help that you need." And so I had to get on a wait list, and I was like, "Well, I want to keep going with him." But at the same time, it's like he told me not to stop from getting the help that I need. And I'm in a really dark, kind of rough spot right now. So I think I just have to go with somebody else.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's rough. Um, One thing when you started therapy, one thing that I just wonder if this helped you as much as it helped me. It was my coach convinced me to just start a journal. So like I had an anxiety journal that was kind of carrying with me. Um, because I think one of my challenges was just recognizing that something was triggering anxiety or that I was having an anxiety attack. And even just like writing it down and learning to recognize it was so helpful and like so cathartic with like realizing that this isn't normal.
Yeah.
I think that was my first step.
Yeah. That was one of my first steps was like, I kept like it's an app and it reminds me three times a day. And, um, I rate it like, not good to like, uh, really anxious or something like that. I can change them. Um, and it's kind of like tells me if I'm in a depressed mode or anxious mode. And then it kind of maps it out for me. But you're right. You hit it right on the spot. Like it's kind of recognizing that you have these problems coming up. Right. Cause sometimes like you don't even know what's going on until you stop and think for a second, like, oh, this isn't normal, is it?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. It was months after I started therapy. And when, so it was months after I started therapy and I was on my first work trip. So it was like when the COVID vaccines had come out. It was probably pretty early in 2021. Um, and I had a complete panic attack. And it was when so I was traveling alone, going to visit a warehouse for work. And it was like back when like Hilton's and Hyatt's had like every room was sealed and there's a blue seal on the room and it's like cleaned with Lysol. And that's how they like showed that it had been disinfected. And then when you break the seal and you go into the room and that, it was, I forgot what they called it. It was like disinfection theater kind of like
Yeah.
we know now it didn't really matter to wrap everything with plastic they had done that and it when I opened the room it had turned it into like I was in isolation again And I had this like bizarre panic attack that even if I remember it, it was like I walked into the room and I was back in the hospital in isolation and like
Oh,
completely freaked out. And in a way, I was really glad that I had that intervention to talk to the therapy and the coach, because I recognized it and I didn't completely freak out. I mean, I freaked out. Don't get me wrong. Like I was like, what do I do? And I remember kind of like I remember going into like the bathroom of the hotel and like looking in the mirror, and I saw myself in the hotel room. And it's been one of the craziest things was like I had to talk to the therapist afterward, where even if I know cognitively, like I was not
hmm
in the hospital. I was in a hotel room outside of a warehouse, like near a warehouse in California. But even like rewinding, you think about your memories and you rewind. When I remember that moment, I'm in a hospital. It's like it was like my brain just like spliced it, and
it's
it's like I'm there. It's
y-
insane.
yeah. Well, it's crazy to me, like dealing with some of the stuff, like what the brain can actually make you think. Um, there's so much we know about the brain, but there's also so little. I mean, same
Yeah,
with
yeah.
like mental health. Like I, it's just so many. Like even myself, there's so many unexplainable things that have happened to me. Like,
And like
well,
triggers change
yeah,
too,
yeah, yeah.
over time.
There's I touched base on this a little bit, but during some of my hardest times, I dissociate. Um, not know if it was because of the medicine I was on or if I was just like that far gone. I can't tell you to this day, but I would um, become childlike. Uh, what? So back in the day, I was when I was having so many seizures back in 2009. I actually moved back home with my parents for a bit, and I'd get in these modes where I'd act like a 5-year-old, and I'd want to watch like Horton Hears the Who. And not that I love my animated movies, but
Yeah, yeah.
and I don't remember
It's
any of
comforting.
this. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't remember any of this. This is all from like people telling me like you did some really bizarre stuff.
Well, when I've noticed that kind of stuff happening for me, it's sort of like I I wonder if it's a defense mechanism where it's like something neurons are firing in the wrong
Yeah,
way, and you go to like extreme comfort. For me, it's
yeah,
often like food, where I'm like, I need Burger King.
yeah.
Like, I
I
need,
I am definitely an anxious eater.
yeah.
Like when I during my biggest spouts of like anxiety, I would go downstairs at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I would just like dig in, get me a bowl of ice cream, get me some cereal, and sit down and watch a show.
Mine is it's like a grilled cheese with like a ton of hot sauce, and it's like I have to. It's like then I'll calm down and be able to sleep. At like the 2 or 3 a.m. kind of thing.
Yep. That and loads of caffeine. Like I used caffeine as a vice for many years.
Oh, and I mean, that's the worst because it's so temporary and it works until it doesn't. And then like 2 hours later, like
You're like
the crash
crashing.
or yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. What like therapy type stuff has like worked for you the best? Like what techniques were you taught that you're like, oh, this is something that really helps me out?
For me, I mean, it just sounds corny, but it's meditation. So I got a, kind of the one Black Friday, probably 2021. I got the like permanent annual membership, to the Calm app. And that was one of the things that the behavioral coach, like when I was kind of doing the intensive therapy, it was lots of worksheets. It was lots of like stuff. And it was kind of circling around meditation. And I found such a huge difference in my day when I sit. And for me, it almost doesn't matter what of like, 'cause the Calm app has like 5 different kind of daily 10 to 20 minute long meditations. It doesn't matter which one I do or what the intention is.
Mm-hmm.
As long as I do it, it helps me so much like calm my mind and center myself. And I see such a huge difference. I don't do it every day. I forget or I get lazy, but I see such a huge difference. Like in my heart rate, in my breathing, if I just do that for like 10 or 15 minutes. And also for like an intervention, like when things are really bad, like I have like stopped, with a work
Mm-hmm.
meeting or, something like that, like gone to meditate. Um, but it helps just closing my eyes, like sinking into kind of wherever I am, and just like forcing myself to breathe. One of the things since since kind of 2020, I wear an Apple Watch. I'm not the like biggest kind of fitness person, but it's being able to tell like my blood. This is one thing that's probably never going to go away, but it has a blood oxygen monitor. I can't tell you the number of times when I like start to get anxious, I just test my blood oxygen. It's sort of like the grounding thing for me, where if my blood oxygen is fine, it's sort of like I know I'll be fine, at least for this point in my life. Because my blood oxygen got so low, it's like one of those things that causes anxiety. If I don't have it on me, then I'm like, I start to get short of breath or something like that. I'll be honest, since 2020, I've never actually, like, it was like the pneumonia was bad. I've never actually had low blood oxygen since then, but I just need that as sort of a crutch. And that's along with the sort of meditation. I can see the difference on like my blood oxygen, my and my heart rate, as I'm meditating.
Yeah. And see, I've never got like way into meditation, but one thing that really has helped me is breath work, some breathing exercises, and then it's just a couple. There's a method that it's called the 5-4-3-2-1 method. So if I'm feeling like overly anxious, you kind of just take a step back and you look around the room and you pick 5 things that you can see, and you can just kind of briefly explain them in your mind. And then 4 is touch, kind of just go around, touch 4 different things. And then number 3 is, when was that? I can't remember the order, but there's smell, taste, just all the 5 senses, and you just go through them. There's a specific order, but I am not recalling it. And it's,
as long as you do it,
it pulls me out like immediately.
One thing that it's kind of really similar that does that for me, like this is mostly with sleep, and I think it's called a body scan, and I'm not sure if this falls under meditation or breath work or whatever, but it's kind of like you lay there. I think you could probably do it sitting up, and you start either like at one extremity, so like the top of your head, the bottom of your feet, like your fingers, and you just sort of like go down, and you relax it, like you relax the top of your head until like you can move on to your temples.
Are you like tapping or?
Oh no, it's almost like you're just completely still.
Okay.
And just mentally mentally just relaxing like the tension. And how often, especially in your temples or kind of in your head, you hold a lot of tension, or it could be in your feet. And just sort of like once you start doing it, it like unlocks the tension, like you kind of realize it, and then you can like kind of move on. Sometimes, I mean, for me, sometimes it could be like a half an hour, because one of the challenges with it, and this was one of the coaching things, was so like you're trying to like kind of like, let's say you start on the top of your head, you're relaxing your temples, you're relaxing your cheek, and like I clench my teeth a lot, so I grind my teeth, so like relaxing all of that and moving down. One of the things is it's almost like a sport where like if you find yourself then tensing up again, let's say I get down to like my shoulders, my jaw tenses up, you have to go back and you have to then continue relaxing. Yeah. But I don't want to say it's annoying, because it can sometimes take so long, like we're kind of like feeling really anxious. But one thing that I found is like when I can't sleep, and if I do that, like I actually get through like the whole body, like better than melatonin or any prescription or anything, like even chamomile tea. That if I can focus enough to do it, will like actually get me to relax, especially with sleeping. It like then I'll like fall asleep.
And it's amazing to me that like just learning how to do some of these techniques, like just how much of the boulder off your shoulders it can take off. Like it just releases so much like tension, and it's just insane to me.
With how much is in your head and how much you can control, like once you recognize it, like you recognize that like, oh, I'm not supposed to be like grinding my teeth kind of thing. I'm supposed to be able to like loosen my jaw and relax.
You just reminded me of a quote. I was actually in a therapy session today, and my therapist said that awareness is 50% of the battle. If you can be aware of like what's going on, you can start doing the other stuff.
I'd say at least 50%. Like I remember, was talking with therapists or other professionals. I feel like sometimes also like if you do, when I was going weekly, near the end, I was sort of like, trying to think of stuff like what else could we talk about? What else is causing me anxiety? And talked with some great professionals who like they knew what questions to ask. There was always more like that I wasn't even
Yeah.
aware of. Like there was always something else.
Yeah. Once you learn what causes anxiety and all the different things behind it, there's always something. It's just
Oh yeah.
never ending. I think I could pull out a big, huge, long list of stuff that causes me anxiety, but I think I'm getting better at recognizing it finally.
Yeah. So it's I'm the youngest I'm the youngest of 6 kids. So I've got a pretty big family. And this was probably like 2 or 3 years ago. What year is it? It's 2025. Um I'm lucky that, my mom is still with us, and she's that boomer generation. They're not, I wouldn't say she's not against mental health, but like she's not quite there. And I'm not a therapist, so I'm not going to diagnose her, but
Yeah.
um and it's hard to get all 6 of us all around. And at some point during kind of especially during COVID, but at some point, all 6 of us have talked to a therapist, and we were around, and it had nothing to do with my mom. And this probably says volumes. You could tell she was getting upset. She's like, "Fine, all my fault." And we were like, "No, but you need to dive into that."
It's yeah, and she's the one that like hasn't come around to it, but that's
Yeah, she was like,
good.
"Oh, it's all my fault. You're all in therapy as if there's something wrong with us." And we all had to like check her and be like, "No, this is healthy. We're being healthy. You are the one who's being the stick in the mud."
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I'm the only one in my family that's talked to a therapist.
Yeah. Well, I talked to friends about it, and it was that point. I think it was because I was talking about it, and then it came out that all of my siblings, we had never discussed this. At least once or twice, everybody had talked to a therapist or some kind of mental health thing. Which was wild. One of my older brothers had never, like, he won't get his cholesterol checked. Like he won't do anything. But his wife had convinced him, I think, at some point during COVID to talk to somebody.
Yeah, and speaking, it's important to like get your levels checked.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because speaking of that, because I think your body and your mental health are so like interrelated, and you don't even know it.
Oh, 100%. I mean, there's the food links, but like, the anxiety could cause. I mean, I think anxiety could cause like elevated liver enzymes.
Oh,
I have
I totally
no
agree.
sides to that. To back that up.
No, um, but like when I was going through all my stuff, my last seizure episodes, I went and got all my levels checked, and they put me on some supplements, and I think it helped me kind of even out my anxiety and depression.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I wonder if that might be a decent segue to what I've
Yeah,
been doing lately
yeah,
with
go
Vital
for it.
Spring.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've worked in consumer goods for a while, and that was actually part of why I was so anxious in 2020. I was working at like a kitchenware company, and it was a kitchen startup, that was at that point when everybody was buying waffle makers, air fryers. And so my job was like, on top of the illness, like my job was more stressful than it ever had been in my life. So I've worked in consumer goods for a while. And about 2 years ago, I stumbled into a bottle of water that was at the grocery store here in New York that I'd never seen before, from Slovenia. And I'm ethnically Slovenian on my mom's side. Um, and it was like $6 for one bottle of water, and it was like it had so many minerals in it. It was kind of floating, like a snow globe. So bought it, drank it, and like felt a little bit better, but I had no idea what it was. That's just really started this journey of like learning that supplements and things like that can really help, especially minerals can really help with just overall feeling better. So it turns out that water is from the most magnesium rich source of water, really like supplementation that you could get naturally in the world, that to the best of my knowledge, that's the spring. So it's got a lot of magnesium, there's calcium, other electrolytes, a little potassium. Basically, like, went back to the grocery store, bought all 6 bottles that were left. And I haven't seen it in the US again since. And it was kind of like rationing it out because it just would have a sip of it at night and like felt a little bit better. I know now it's the magnesium and calcium. It's used in like thousands of biochemical processes with like nerves and muscle function.
Yeah, I'm on a special, like, I think it's magnesium. I know I'm on magnesium, but it's like specifically for the brain.
Yeah.
To help me, like, because I had a really bad like brain fog with all my stuff that went on. So, but my wife
Yeah.
swears by magnesium.
So many people do. And I was probably magnesium deficient because everything we've been talking about, like drinking coffee, a lot of the stuff that you do to help treat anxiety depletes your body of magnesium. Either it's a diuretic. So all of those minerals and electrolytes, your body uses throughout the day. So you need a constant supply of them. And, from people that I've talked to in the research that I've done, if you're not basically vegan and eating, pumpkin seeds every day, you're probably at any point of the day deficient. So because it's hard to get that consistent supply, that's why I think that water worked so well for me. So, and that's where Vital Spring came in. So, it started as sort of like a passion project of, I want to feel good. Like I felt after having this water, I don't want to spend $6 for a bottle of it every time. And I can't find it. Like it was almost impossible to get. Luckily, because I work in consumer goods, I had asked a couple people around, like, could I just make this? So with AI, I asked my brother's an organic chemist, so I had him help too. Found like where to buy basically like 1 pound of a time of like different magnesium supplements and powders. And I bought a jewelry scale, and I was literally just tweaking it and making it the formula on my own, and started to drink it, like, just because I could make the powder, mix it with water, and it emulated kind of what that water was. And eventually I started to like tell people about it. They wanted to try it. I realized, hey, this is what I'm doing every day, selling goods, maybe things that I'm not passionate about. I think it took about a year. I'm like, I have a product. Like, people like this, that they've tried it. And went then to the source. So I had to use some kind of, I still have cousins in Slovenia. So had to use a little help, but found a place that would manufacture it in Europe. So they helped me tweak the flavor a little bit. So that natural source of water, it doesn't have any lemon flavoring.
Yeah.
I added a little bit of like a natural lemon flavor, to make it more palatable. The water tastes bad. I'll just, the benefits are totally worth it.
Yeah.
The water is expensive and it tastes bad.
Yeah.
I kind of a passion project and stumbled into it. Got double checked it with the formula with doctors and chemists to make sure that we weren't going to it was as gentle as it could be. Doesn't interfere with medication. And it's funny you mentioned that you have the form of magnesium for your brain. Part of it is because so many magnesium supplements are so rich in magnesium and they're hard to digest or absorb that they end up being laxatives. So it's like almost anything, as long as you're getting magnesium, that you don't just like poop out, would help. So, that was kind of like the big thing, is I wanted to make this formula to make it adaptable, fit into any lifestyle, as, allergen, like, deficient, like as basically as like simple as it could possibly be, and just focus on getting just the minerals. So it's not about like getting a bunch of artificial salts or artificial flavors, or there's not a lot of sugar. Everything in it is supposed to be, every ingredient is supposed to have a purpose. It's not just like a bunch of stuff thrown together. So it's inspired by nature, and meant to be able to kind of like adapt to your lifestyle. Because, as we've both been talking about, almost everybody, like, magnesium just helps you feel a little bit better. Having calcium, having electrolytes, and drinking enough water, just helps, just almost everything.
Yeah, that's really cool that you just stumbled upon it like that way, and you're like, oh, well, I have a product, like, I might as well do something with it. Like,
it was like, I'm like, I think I feel better. And then I'm like, let's go with it. Let's figure it out from there. Then check with doctors, check with chemists. Yeah, they were all kind of like, this makes you feel better.
And so you said you've been running this for what, 2 years? Was it? Did I hear 2 years in there somewhere?
It took just under 2 years to develop it.
Okay.
I originally had the idea and started to kind of just make it at home. But kind of behind me, there's actually a cabinet that's got like the jugs of the different magnesium salts and things like that I was playing around with and testing.
That's where all the secrets lie.
Yeah. It's not that. Yeah. The secret formula, I could tell you what it is. It's hard to make. And I spent actually one of the hardest things was finding the right partner that I really trusted to manufacture it, because I'm not going to build a factory to make this. And I wanted to find, and that's where I ended up kind of being lucky to find somebody in Slovenia. So it's made to EU standards. So a lot of that is like, things like packaging with BPAs and different stuff. There are so many more regulations in Europe, so I don't even have to worry about that. When I was trying to source it in the US, I don't want to name names of factories, but like, they were like nickel and diming me on things like, oh, do you want to do it? Do you want to have a test to make sure that there aren't heavy metals, put into the product? I was like, whoa. Is that a risk that, like, if I manufacture with you, there could be heavy metals and you don't just test for that? All of that's just done in Europe. Like it was all included.
So you don't have to take any extra steps there. Like,
it's just all the safety stuff is regulated. It's not like based on, just if you're willing to spend the money on it, which that experience of trying to source this sort of product also terrified me of like anything that I buy now. I'm like really double checking to make sure I'm like, I trust the company, because it was the like, oh, do you want to test to make sure that it's not like bacterially there's no bacteria contamination. It's like, that's an option. These are things that shouldn't be options.
This part of the quality assurance in my brain.
Yeah. So that's what. So I was. It took probably almost a year, 6 months. I've lost track of when I get to that point of talking with factories, and then they would give me their kind of QC like plan. A lot of them was just it was like QC for pay. I'm like, whoa, that scares me. Like, a lot.
Yeah. It's, so is this like a product that's in stores, or how would the listeners get it?
So it's just online for right now. It's only been, been working on it for 2 years. It actually just launched around Thanksgiving. So I finally got the product from Slovenia. It's only been a couple of weeks. So it's available at Vital, VITAL -spring, SPRING.com. So vitalspring.com. Or I think my SEO is good enough that if you just Google Vital Spring, it should lead you to me. At least it did yesterday that I checked.
Yeah. I'm going to go check it out. I'm going to order some.
So yeah.
Because one thing I found with like some of this stuff too, so I drink it's full of, I know it has electrolytes in it and a lot of other stuff, but I suffer from migraines too. And this is the best thing I've ever found for migraines. It's just like a hydration drink. It's called Relight or something like that. And there's different ones that you can, but this is one that my doctor recommended. And I was like, all these years I've had like migraines, and doctors like, oh, take this, take this pill, take this medicine. And all it takes is a drink.
Oh yeah. Well, and you have to be careful with a lot of those. Like, some are great. And my own kind of, over the last 2 years, been trying to develop this. The thing is, it's not a hydration drink. Like, there's no sugar in it. So it's not like meant to be a liquid IV, but fortunately it's packaged the same way. So part of it is just explaining to people like, my aunt was taking it before a workout. And I was like, no, it's actually for after a workout, if anything. Like, it's replenishing the minerals. It's not, there's no sugar in it. But a lot of those, it sounds like you found a good one, especially if a doctor recommended it. A lot of them, like the hydration drinks, are insanely flavored salt. Like there's one out there, I don't want to like name names, where I'm like, it has more salt in it, just straight up table salt, than a Big Mac. And it's loaded, and then it's loaded with artificial sweeteners and flavoring. So it's like watermelon lemonade flavored salt. And it's like, who is that for? Like, if anything, I'll like cause more migraines. And then, like there's Relay, I think Ultima is another one that's like really good, like true, like hydration products.
Yeah. These ones are flavored, but they try to stay away from, like, I know they have a couple like iffy ingredients in there. Some of them, but it's like, like I can't explain it. It's like the one thing that like it's like bam, like it's just gone. But
Yeah, hydration. Well, and I mean, I think the flavors themselves aren't bad. I mean, I add lemon juice to my stuff. It's the like, if it's like blue pineapple, pineapples aren't blue. That's not
yeah,
natural.
yeah, yeah.
But like an
Why you're
orange
adding
flavor or citrus or
all these
yeah,
dyes to that's a whole different conversation though. It's like the food industry.
oh yeah. I mean, like this orange Gatorade. There's nothing natural about that.
Nope, nope, nope. It's like one of the worst drinks for you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I have anybody from Gatorade listening to my podcast. So, um,
Hopefully, huh? I'll get a letter.
no. So like, let's go back on the mental health side of things a little bit. I just thought of something, and I'm just wondering, like somebody that's struggling, like do you think are like the most important things that they should know that maybe they're just realizing it, or maybe they're just getting help? Like what advice would you give somebody that is struggling?
I think this is very much on the surface, but if you're struggling with anything, I think the biggest thing is find somebody to talk to. And it might not be a therapist. Like you might not be able, a therapy could be $80, $120, $50, whatever it is. I know that could be expensive, but just find somebody, maybe even online. There could be a friendly voice on Reddit, like, or on a different online forum. But if you're struggling, like, don't ever feel alone. Like, make sure that you find somebody that you could talk to, even if it's your cat, even if it's your dog, just like, let it out. Yeah, I think even just the act of saying something out loud, even if it's to the wall or or to anybody that could, I think that is helpful. Because what I found for myself, and even for when when I've talked about mental health, it's like this spiral of like you feel alone, then you don't talk about it, and then you kind of bubble it up, or you bottle it in, and then it gets worse and worse and worse. So if you can identify that spiral and just like find some sort of release to talk to communicate, it's terrifying, especially if you've never talked about your mental health issues in the past. But like, just be brave and talk to somebody about it. You're not crazy. And that's the first, for me, I think that's like probably the first step for most people.
Well, yeah, I agree. I can't hit on that enough. Like, I think I said that in my very first episode, is you need to find somebody that's in your corner. Like you need to, if it's one people, if it's two people, I have a good friend that has struggled with mental health issues. So every time I'm feeling down, like I'll be like, dude, like, how did you get over this? Like I have this going on and I don't know what to do. And he'll listen when I need him to listen, and he'll give me tips when I need tips.
Yeah, it's that it was, and also when you're talking to somebody about it, there's I forgot what the question is, but it's like, do you want comfort or do you want solutions? And even checking with that, like sometimes people just need someone to talk to. Sometimes they need advice, and both are valid.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say in the very beginning, you touched base on this a little bit too. It is hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to like put yourself out there to the world. But the more you do it, the easier it gets. And it's like, it's almost like, I think of, so this is like my, I think 5th episode that I'm recording right now, we're on right now. And each time it gets easier for me. And it's just very motivating to me to hear like other people's stories and kind of feel that connection and thinking like, you know what, I'm not alone. Like other people are struggling with this too.
And what you're doing is so important. Like just creating a space for people to talk about this. Who knows who will find your podcast, because it's it's permanently out there, on the platforms.
Yeah. And it's like one way, like I feel like I can connect with people that it doesn't matter who we are. Like we have a connection. Like it doesn't, this is where nothing matters. It's just you're suffering, I'm suffering. And I think it needs to be talked about.
We both have brains that are just swimming in chemicals and just like screwing us up all the time.
Every single day, man. Every single day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see. Did I have any other questions? I always write it down on my phone, so let me just make sure that we touch base on everything. Any last minute thoughts that you want to tell the
I
listeners?
think, yeah, it's funny we're recording this today. I forgot what day of the year exactly it is, but it's right around January 20th, 25th is like the darkest day of the year. We're right about that point in terms of like holidays are the past.
Mm-hmm.
It's winter for far too long still. It's still cold. So I think maybe at the last point would just be like, we're all dealing with this. Just enjoy life, enjoy while you can. Might be kind of a poopy day as it is in a lot of the weather's bad or gray or cold or
Mm-hmm.
windy and all that. But I guess the reminder of this is probably a good metaphor. Like there's always another day. It could always be better tomorrow. There's
Yeah.
the sun will come out tomorrow.
Yeah, there definitely is light at the end of the tunnel. Like,
Definitely.
and I think sometimes we focus too much. Like when we get into these uh, moments of depression or anxiety, we focus too much on the negative. But once you learn, and I always say to my therapist, I had to subconsciously learn to like recognize this stuff. And once I did, I started seeing the light.
You can climb out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Uh, and where you mentioned vitalspring.com. Vital
Yep.
is it
Vital-spring.com.
spring.com.
Yeah.
Anywhere else?
I couldn't afford vitalspring.com. I needed that dash.
Makes sense. Anywhere else that people can find you?
Just there for now. Probably later this year I'll end up on Amazon and start pitching to retailers. But right now it's just online.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed this one. I have really enjoyed talking with Jim today. Please follow us on Instagram at OvercomePod and share and follow and do all that fun stuff.